Raising cyber smart kids in the age of AI. Cybersecurity tips every parent needs. Today's guest on the Mothers of Boys Survival Guide is Marcelle Lee, a cybersecurity consultant, educator, and mom of 3 boys. Marcelle works in cyber threat intelligence, network security, and digital forensics, helping people understand how online risks actually show up in their real lives. What makes this conversation different is that Marcelle lives it on both sides, professionally and at home. Today, we'll talk about online predators, AI, and how parents can teach good cyber hygiene without fear of overreaction. Her philosophy is simple and refreshing. Stay curious, not clueless. Calm, not reactive, and consistently present, not perfect. Welcome, Marcelle.
Thanks, Suzy. I'm excited to be here.
So, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience and how that might have crossed over to your home life when your boys are now, adulting or young
Yes.
adults? Um, and I would think that, and then I have young adults too. I think we've watched this whole generation come up with the digital communications and cyber. So give us a little background.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't start out in cybersecurity or even tech of any sort. I had a completely different career and doing like management and operations and things like that. And around 2010, I decided that the cybersecurity thing sounded interesting and I wanted to learn more about it. So I sort of launched myself into this new career path. And here I am now doing what I call my passion, right? So I
Hmm.
really found the right fit for me. But as I was going through that journey of transitioning from an everyday user, just like many people probably who hear this podcast, and probably you're more savvy than most, um, but
Thanks.
yeah, as I transitioned, I did not forget my user roots, and I think that's something I'm also very, very uh, well, I'll say the word passion again. I should be able to think of something else, but very passionate about also is just bringing cybersecurity knowledge to, you know, just regular people, right, who don't have that kind of training that I do now. But as I was going through education, training, and whatnot, my kids were kind of right there beside me while I was doing it. And as I learned things, they learned things. So I think, having a parent in the cybersecurity space definitely engenders more informed children. Um,
Hmm.
even
Right?
if they don't want to listen to you, I think, they can't help but notice, the things that you're talking about. So that's kind of how it worked for me. And in just talking about like, for example, like, oh, I maybe got a malicious text or email or something, and we have like a family conversation about that. What does it look like? What does it mean? What do you do? What's happening?
Right.
So that's
Right.
yeah.
So the boys were getting their knowledge more by osmosis of, the day-to-day conversations. Can you think of a moment that worried you and you really had to, sit down and have a little bit more serious of a conversation or do or make an action in your house?
Um, so one of the things that I learned early on in cybersecurity is that just an awareness of what devices you have on your network and sort of we would call that like an attack surface, right? So what are all the different ways that, well, I'll say a threat actor, but we could say a predator or whatever, fill in the blank for some person that you don't want in your world. Um,
Mhm.
different ways that they could potentially get in. So just an awareness of the devices and things you don't even really think about, like gaming consoles.
Mhm.
So, maybe doing like an inventory of how people are communicating out in the world is a good step. But I did that and I ran what's called an Nmap scan, like just like an MAP in my environment. And there were so many devices that like I thought that maybe we had like, I don't know, 6 to 10 devices in our house. And it was like, no, there's way more things than that connected to the internet. And this is, over 10 years ago. So now it's even worse because, we've got so many more Wi-Fi enabled
Hmm.
devices and smart home devices. And like I can literally be in my living room and I can see like the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi for my neighbors' appliances and cameras and things like that.
Right.
So yeah,
Yep.
that was an eye-opening moment for me. So just assessing what's in your house is just super important because if you don't have the awareness, you don't even know like what to look for.
Right. And I remember initially, and I still do this now, but as the tools for the Wi-Fi services got better,
Hmm.
I would go through and I would identify each one and associate it with a person,
Yeah,
and then I could put, I call my boys Ernest and Exuberance in my book, and Ernest is a little bit older than Exuberance, so, like, Ernest's devices didn't go off until 10, and Exuberance's devices might have gone off at 9,
yeah.
right? But, like, they would just automatically shut
Yeah.
down. It was something I didn't have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely baked in security controls like that that, many people are not even aware of. But yeah, what you're describing is definitely something that can be done. And a lot of people will use, like in my home, I have a couple of two different mesh networks, and even within those apps, you can set all kinds of controls and that
Mhm.
sort of thing. So limiting, that time of day usage thing is really key because I feel like sometimes it's maybe the middle of the night when
Yep.
shenanigans are happening, right?
Yes. Yes, for sure. So when parents hear online predators, right, they imagine worst case scenarios. And, the world is changing super, super fast.
Yeah.
So, what do you think that threat is today, for parents today? And do you have any practical suggestions for minimizing, mitigating that?
Yeah, so I think traditionally we think of, like maybe a teenage girl meeting a predator online and then meeting in person and, whatever happens. I think that's kind of what comes to mind in terms of like an image,
Hmm.
but it's so much more than that these days. And like I wouldn't even worry that much about, kids meeting somebody in person, but I'd be more worried about um, things like sextortion, for example. So maybe there is a compromising photograph that your child took or whatever that somebody could use for blackmail, basically. Um, and also, there's so much like spyware out there and things like that where if you get spyware on your device, you probably don't even know it, right? But it's something malware, malicious software on a computer that allows somebody to remotely like view your camera, maybe hear, ambient sound in the room. So that's another thing that I worry about too, because if somebody does get that kind of access, they can capture all kinds of information and use that against the child as well. Um, and really just um, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like cyberbullying is such
Hmm.
a huge thing too. And I only know this anecdotally, but I mean, kids don't tend to talk about being cyberbullied, right? At least not
Right.
with their parents. And it can lead to, devastating consequences, where self-harm and that kind of thing. So so yeah, there's plenty of ways that kids could be targeted, and not just girls, certainly, but boys as well too.
You were probably had this relationship among your friends. I call my the mothers of boys the mob. So you were
Yeah,
definitely in the mob, and my friend group was the mob, and the moms sort of had different roles. So like there was safety mom who was worried about just about everything. And there was road trip mom who went off and took everybody to go look for fossils or
yeah,
something. And I was really more the tech mom. You were probably the tech mom. And, my background was broadcast television and media. So, I had sort of an aggressive, maybe style. about tech and media and devices in the home, as we sort of talked about, and talked about, with the kids all the time. And when they were little, we had the computer in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So, it was something that they could learn how to use, they could type, I could help them with it and just sort of keep an eye on what was going on. Um, but as they got older, it becomes really, more difficult because they're doing homework and they have laptops and they're in
Yeah.
their bedroom. And so, what was your, experience, and what do you think are the big lessons learned that you took away from that period?
Yeah, definitely. So it is really hard to have that sort of central computer in the house these days, right? Because everybody has a
Mhm.
laptop or an iPad or a phone, right?
Mhm.
And it's virtually impossible to like monitor all those things.
Well, once they hit a certain
Yeah,
period, I think many parents are pushing back on when kids have access to that today.
I
I
hope
think
so.
they I know.
I don't, I don't really have, I don't know too many people these days with like young kids,
Mhm.
but I do, I hope that that's the case. Because it's just there. It's like handing. Well, this is going to sound so dramatic, but it's almost like having guns in your house that aren't secure. Like just letting a
Mhm.
child use a device without any kind of guardrails or monitoring or anything is just kind of crazy to me. I can't imagine doing that. I will say, the spyware that I mentioned before, there is actually software that parents can use, which is
Hmm.
essentially the same thing where you're monitoring activity, but for less nefarious purposes. Um, and then, there's things you can do about with the browser having controls and all that sort of thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, any kind of control that you can put on there, chances are your kid is going to be able to figure out how to get around that. So I just think, being open and transparent and talking about, just the importance of being safe on your device. It's almost like when our kids were younger, probably, it was all about stranger danger, don't talk to
Mhm.
strangers. But now, those strangers are in your house already. And, so you have to be even more vigilant than we
Mhm.
used to be, right? Because the actual stranger walking down the street wasn't that much of a thing. Um,
Right.
but, our kids really learned that because we drilled it into them. So you kind of need to have the same sort of mindset for the devices.
Right. So, don't open the door if you don't know the person,
Yeah.
right? Means don't click on a link if you don't know who's sending it to you, or really take a look at the who it's from. Is that a legitimate email address or text, message,
Right,
right?
for sure. And I would say like these days, I mean, I don't know how much kids use email. I try to avoid using it, but it's still like such a mainstay, unfortunately. But text messages, there's a 100% the possibility that a message could be, malicious for sure. It
Mhm.
could be links or whatever. I'm sure, many people have seen, for example, like the Maryland Toll Easy Pass
Mhm.
text messages, which are totally fake, right?
Right. Yep.
And it's not just Maryland, it's all over the country and around the world, actually. But people click on these things and they're like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I have to pay this toll. Um, so, yeah, it's super prevalent in all different kinds of platforms and also social media. I mean, kids are on social media typically
Mhm.
a fair bit, and malicious activity can come from that direction as well. So it really is a lot about education and just letting your kids know not to blindly trust, everything that comes to them, just like you wouldn't trust, that creepy old dude who wants to give you candy, whatever.
Right. Now we have artificial intelligence,
Hmm.
AI, which is, ChatGPT, and all these different platforms are jumping in full steam ahead. Um, how is that changing the online risks for kids? And what do parents need to understand even if their child isn't on social media?
Yeah. So AI is an interesting thing because it has a lot of useful
Mhm.
purposes, but it also has a lot of, I would call like pitfalls, and especially for younger adults or children. Um, Obviously, well, we know this, but I don't know that everybody else knows it. You can't believe everything the AI tells you. First of all,
Mhm.
there's,
Yeah,
AI.
it
Yeah,
hallucinates.
exactly. Hallucinations are huge. I've seen it myself, and I use probably half a dozen different AI agents,
Right.
because different ones are good for different things. Again, falls into the case of, you have to be educated and smart about it. But also, there has been a few cases now where young people engage with AI, and you're chatting with this AI agent almost as
Mhm.
if it was a person, and you can easily get lulled into thinking that you are talking to like some sentient being that
Mhm.
cares about you, but it's 100% just a machine spewing out what it thinks is appropriate responses. And there's been some really sad, sad stories about at least two that I know of, the kids that they killed themselves because they were having these conversations with AI about, how sad and depressed they were and how life wasn't worth living. And the AI basically kind of gave them suggestions on how to end things. And, there's lawsuits right now because of this. To me, that's absolutely horrifying. Um, and I, we're moms of boys. I know what it's like to have your child not talk to you about personal things,
Mhm.
but this is just really, really important. And you could say, oh, well, we're not going to use AI in our house or whatever, but that's a mistake too, because like I said, it's a useful tool. And
Mhm.
you're also setting your child up kind of not for success if you don't let them use the tools that are, like employers want that, and they might need to use it in school. Although schools are kind of weird. They're like, I have no AI. But but yeah, so I think just understanding that AI is not a person. AI does
Mhm.
not care about you at all,
Mhm.
and try to provide other people that your child could speak to. If it's not you, because sometimes it's tough to have those relationships, try to have some other adult, responsible person in their world that they could go to talk about things that they're worried about. But yeah, that's the one that scares me the most, is just where kids think that they're talking to somebody, like I said, with
Right, and they're getting valuable, mental health,
yeah,
recommendations.
yeah. AI
Um,
is not for that, for sure.
so so there's a lot of settings, that you can turn on or off in the AI. Are there any that stand out to you that parents should really take a good look at?
So to be honest, ah, I can't really say yes with any degree of certainty because I mean there's a new AI platform agent every single day. And it's
Mhm.
like something that might work for one platform is not going to be available in another platform. I would,
Right.
again, you could also ask to see your children's chat history with these things because they
Mhm.
store the history. Um, Another thing too, and I think this is less of a sort of like a family thing as opposed to like a corporate thing, but everything you type into these chatbots are going and getting stored somewhere and probably getting analyzed to train the AI to be even more whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So that's, something to think about too. Like I personally wouldn't put any kind of sensitive information into to AI. Um,
One of the things I find the most concerning about AI from a multimedia standpoint is that you could put a photo in it and it could alter
oh yeah,
the photo.
yeah.
And from there, so you don't even have to have taken a picture of yourself in an unflattering way. It would imagine doing it for you,
Oh
and
yeah.
then that could be used as blackmailing and bullying of a child, and, you know, the communication part of that and having those open forms of communication with your kids seem like the only true defense we have. And I don't, do you have any sense of this AI
Yeah, for
art
sure. I mean, you actually just jogged my memory about something I was reading about recently. I mean, there's websites out there where you can upload a photograph and it will like peel off the clothes and make the person look naked. And
Mhm.
I mean, there's no law against doing that apparently. So, because it's not real, but yeah, so I mean, hopefully our kids aren't sending around already nude pictures. They do. We know this. It happens.
Mhm.
But just being aware that somebody could take a picture of you that was totally, a regular picture that maybe you put on Facebook or Insta or something, and convert that to make it appear that you were nude. So
So if you had a teenage, boy at this point, those are conversations you would definitely have
yeah,
with them.
absolutely. And part of the tricky bit about this is that unfortunately parents aren't necessarily that savvy to these sorts of things either. So they don't even necessarily know what to ask, what to look for. Um, I'm sure there's plenty of parents that aren't really even using AI or understanding just how many different ones are out there. Like you could say, oh, you can't use ChatGPT and or check your computer for it, but it's like, yeah, well, what
Mhm.
about the 4,500 other ones? So,
Right.
um, so yeah, so and again, this goes back to like I was saying, I care so much about bringing just this kind of education to just regular users because it's
Mhm.
just not out there. I mean, if you work for some company, you might get like your annual checkbox cybersecurity compliance training, but usually that's not particularly illuminating for real life type situations like we're talking about.
So last year we did a podcast on gaming
Mhm.
and what, every mom needs to know about Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite,
Yeah,
and what the suggestions were for those different platforms. And it's been really refreshing to see the companies behind, Roblox, for instance, increase their parental controls. YouTube has recently updated their parental controls. Communication was one of the things that the guests for that program talked about a lot as well. But do you have any suggestions for teaching and modeling, good cyber hygiene?
for the gaming platforms. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, for sure, gaming platforms provide sort of their own unique sort of issues. I mean, you still have the problem with, potential predators, um, and it's not uncommon for, somebody to potentially try to groom someone through video games, right? They're playing games with
Hmm.
them, they're pretending that they're, a 13-year-old boy
Younger.
or whatever, but they're not
Yep.
really. Um, so, gosh, I feel like I keep saying, user awareness over and over
Hmm.
again, but some of these things are really hard to control. So, like with my kids, our video game console was in the center of the house, like you're talking about with the
Hmm.
computer, and I could monitor what they were playing, who they were interacting with, and that sort of thing, which I think is really important to do. But again, as you said, they get older and they move to different platforms. It's not quite as out in the open.
Right. Right. Um, so let's say your child, comes to you and they have gone down the wrong rabbit hole. They've clicked on a link or a web page or shared too much. What's the first thing a parent should do?
Yeah, remain calm. Don't overreact, because at the end of the day, that child has come to you to tell you this, and that's really what you want to have happen. Um, so I would say just try to document as much as possible the details of what has happened. If they clicked on maybe a malicious link, then I would actually immediately unplug that computer from the internet, right? Because if it's not plugged into the internet, then there's not going to be any further activity happening. everybody,
keeping in mind Wi-Fi, right? So
yeah,
if it's turn off the Wi-Fi or unplug the internet.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Or just turn off the Wi-Fi on the
Mhm.
device, right? Um, so yeah, so disconnect from the internet in whatever way.
Mhm.
And and then everybody should have antivirus running on all their devices. Actually, I don't know if you can get it for gaming platforms. I'll have to look into that. But certainly you can get it for mobile devices
Mhm.
and regular, laptops and desktop computers. Antivirus, you don't have to pay for it. There's definitely free antivirus out there that comes from the companies that do this for enterprises, right? So they're making tons of money off of selling it to companies so they can give it away for free to, the everyday user. Um, a caveat with that is if you just go search for, you know, Windows antivirus or whatever, iPhone antivirus, there's malicious stuff potentially out there. So just make sure you're getting it from a reputable company.
Mhm.
Um, and I could always give you some names, if you want to put that like in the show notes or something.
Right.
But yeah, so antivirus is really important and definitely on the mobile devices too, especially Android. Like iPhones are a little more protected because it's more of a closed system, but that still doesn't stop you from clicking on links and things like that.
Mhm.
So
Right.
so I definitely recommend antivirus all around. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. And it's not going to fix everything or solve everything, but it's the start. So definitely if you didn't already have the antivirus running or whatever, just make sure that you've checked that computer for any kind of malicious activity.
So afterwards, so
Yeah.
disconnect it from the internet, run the health search, the
Yes,
virus
scans,
search, just like if somebody got sick, you'd stick a thermometer in their mouth.
right? But hopefully they get sick in the first place because you had,
Right.
vaccines or something. That's what it's kind of like. Um, so yeah, and then also, say maybe they clicked on a link that didn't say download malicious software, which is something that
Mhm.
could happen, of course, but maybe they put their credentials into a website that turned out to be like spoofing a real website.
Mhm.
So what do you do then? Then you want to immediately change credentials, preferably not from the impacted device, but like on
Mhm.
another device. Um, and I will mention here too, everybody should be using multi-factor authentication wherever they possibly can. And thankfully it's baked into more and more things these days. But what I mean by that is like, say you get you know, a login request or you're logging into a site and then you have the secondary layer of protection where you'll get like a text message or something with a code you have to put in or you use some kind of authenticator app or whatever. This will really help prevent somebody who gets your credentials from logging into
Mhm.
accounts of yours. Um, so yeah, that's definitely something to do as well. If they overshared information, kind of hard to pull that back, but
Right.
document it and be aware of where it was shared. You can also report cyber crimes to the FBI. They're actually really good about investigating even
Mm.
something that might seem small to you. I did this for one of my sons. They were they did not get victimized, but somebody tried to do like a checks scam with them, where they like
Mm.
sent a check to him and then he was supposed to
Mhm.
deposit it. I don't know, however those check scams work, and
Right.
and we reported that to the FBI and they did actually respond to it. So that's where that documentation comes into play because if you don't really know, so like screenshots,
Mhm.
that kind of thing is useful.
So, we will in the I post every single podcast to a web page, and we will include all of these tips in a way that's accessible for
Okay.
parents. What other suggestions, and which we'll also include on the page, do you have for where parents can go for reliable information?
Yeah, so there's a few that I like. There's, you probably know this one, but Common Sense Media, they have
Mhm.
good resources. Um, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has resources. There's something called cybersafekids.org, connectsafely.org. I can send you all these. You don't have to like try to notate them right now. Um, So those are a few that just kind of came to mind when I was, thinking about this earlier. And then, just having conversations in your house about things that come up. Everybody's going to get
Hmm.
like that phishing email or a weird
Right.
text message. Talk about it, and
Normalize it,
yeah,
not shame it,
yeah,
right?
for sure. And what did you say at the beginning about something about not being clueless or whatever? But it's true. Like
Right.
education it's a powerful tool, right? So
Right. It is. I said, stay curious, not clueless.
yes,
And so at the end of every podcast, I ask our guests to give a motto or something a mom could say to themselves as they're sort of tackling whatever the topic is, which today is cybersecurity. So what would you have to that?
oh, um, so I think my advice to parents is try to learn as much as you can because it'll help protect you as well as your children. Um, and ask questions, stay curious, and just I hate to say it, but just don't blindly trust everything that you see on devices because it's just so mostly not trustworthy.
I know, across the board, absolutely. And that was, from just the pure media standpoint, not a cybersecurity
Yeah,
standpoint. That was something that I had, conversations with my kids for right from the beginning.
yeah,
Was if it comes through that box, which is the television or the computer screen, it's not real. It's somebody's opinion.
yeah.
So you have to validate whether whether it's accurate.
Yeah,
So fact checking. I feel like we're all professional fact checkers now.
it's true. Or we're not. Some of us are not, for sure. You can tell by every time you go on Facebook, somebody's spreading some kind of thing that is not true.
So true. Marcelle, thank you so much for joining the Mothers of Boys Survival Guide podcast today. Your tips are really important, and I know that the mob, the Mothers of Boys, appreciates having this valuable information. We'll include it on our webpage, mothersofboys.life. If this podcast resonated and this episode meant something to you, please find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and share it with your friends. And be kind to yourself, moms.